Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to allow a few more people to filter in, enjoy the webinar, and then we'll get started. All right. Welcome. My name is Tia Brown, and I'm the Administrative Coordinator at the Temple Small Business Development Center. The Temple SBDC helps small businesses start, grow, and succeed. We do this through our no-cost consulting and a variety of our no-cost webinars and training programs like the one you're attending today. You are joining us for acquiring property for your business. We're recording today's session, and a copy of the recording will be sent to all attendees, as well as other follow-up information in an email that will be sent 2 to 3 business days after this webinar. All attendees have been muted. We encourage you to post any questions or any information that you would like to share throughout the webinar and the Q&A and chat box. Now I'll turn over the floor to Angel Rosario.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Angel Rosario. I work for an organization called Community First Fund. My job here today is to just really give you a commercial real estate 101. I try to make it as easy as possible. I do encourage you to put questions in the chat. I will stop kind of after every section so we can have an interactive discussion and I can answer any of your questions. And of course, at the end, we can open it up to Q&A. Any of the packets that we review, during this recording, of course, they'll be sent to you after the show, after the seminar, so that you can use this to write notes or do whatever you want with the information. Hopefully leads you on that journey to purchase a property. At first, I want to talk about Community First Fund, what we do, how we do it, the industry that I'm in, because I think it's really beneficial to people like yourself who are looking to look into the commercial real estate side of things. It's not always very easy, but organizations like myself are here to help. So let me share my screen with you here. Okay. So I work for an organization called Community First Fund. We are what's called a CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution. And we work really closely with local banks. Typically, when a bank doesn't want to do some type of loan or deal, or there's some challenge with the deal itself, CDFIs kind of are your second line of defense. Now, depending on where you live, there's many CDFIs across the country, around 1,200. In Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, some of the really great CDFIs are, of course, Community First Fund, the Women's Opportunities Resource Center, PIDC, Enterprise Center, Pursuit. So these are just some of the names you might have heard out there that kind of all do the same thing. They just all do it a little differently. Our vision in Community First Fund is, to be inclusive, equitable, and vibrant communities where individuals prosper, triumph over poverty, and live free from discrimination. So really, we're there to focus on getting capital to low-income areas, minorities, women borrowers, just individuals who typically don't have a fair shake at borrowing when they need to. Again, our mission, just create financial equity through wealth, building opportunities for individuals, families, business owners, and especially people of color, women, and immigrants. We also align capital and knowledge and advocacy to advance access to financial services, business ownership, housing, and community development. We cover a fairly large area. So we are in Philadelphia. We cover, Berks, the capital region like Harrisburg area, Lehigh Valley, Philadelphia. Since our inception in 1992, we've put over $486 million on the streets and helped over 12,000 jobs, 12,000 companies. So we really do a lot to help people, get financing they need. Besides commercial real estate, Community First Fund also focuses on micro lending, typically smaller loans, anywhere from 2,500 and up. Obviously, we do small business loans. We do startups, even though there are a process for that, but we do startups. And we do really specialized things like housing development loans, we can do manufacturing, things of that nature. So, really we are a one-stop shop for anything you need. But again, there's many great CDFIs in the area that can help you and at least give you different viewpoints of your deal and how it looks. So let me just share another screen with you here, and then we can go to the next section here. And again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about commercial property and purchasing commercial property as a small business owner is that it's not for everyone. Um, you know, kind of start off with the bad news. It's typically is a pretty long process. There's a lot of research that has to be done. And it is a great feeling to own a property, but could also be a big danger in the sense of cost, the commitment you have to make to the property. And timing is everything when it comes to purchasing a commercial property. Just because you can doesn't mean you should necessarily. And that's really important to understand. Let me share my first screen here with you. So before you kind of go down the rabbit hole of purchasing a commercial property, and again, I'll share all these screens with you. Hopefully you guys can see it okay. I made a list of some of the things to consider when purchasing a commercial property. And one of the first things you have to look at is, do I have enough money to buy the property that I want? Okay. And this always includes what your down payment needs to be, and also what your closing costs can be. Of course, closing costs will vary depending on the cost of the property. So, if you're looking for a property that's $150,000, $200,000 range, the closing cost could be pretty low, anywhere from $12,000 to $17,000. But if you're looking for a property that's $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, it's very possible you could pay $30,000, $40,000 in closing cost. And that's on top of making sure that you have money to put down on the property. Most lenders will want anywhere from 10% down to 20% down and up. If you go to your local bank, they typically always want 20% down, which is pretty tough. You could imagine even on a $200,000 property, 20% down is $40,000, which is a lot of money. And again, that's not including closing costs. So that's the biggest part of the bad news is, making sure you have enough money to actually even consider purchasing a property. I highly recommend, not talking to bankers and things like that until you have cash saved up. And again, this has to be cash in your bank account. It can't be money borrowed from a family member that has to be paid back. Again, they can give you money as long as it's not paid back. You can't borrow from a home equity loan to put money down on a property, okay, because that's considered debt equity. So all you did was just move the debt from one side to another, okay? And again, we have to include that when we underwrite the deal. So this is true cash you have in the bank account hanging out that you can use for this transaction. You also want to consider, do I want to pay a higher monthly payment than I do in my rent? I know most people don't want to pay rent because you're not building towards anything, you're not building any ownership, but many times rent is cheaper than having a mortgage because the landlord has already absorbed most of the cost that it takes to purchase a property. So this is where you want to do the math. I think a great idea is to Google, loan calculator and say, hey, if I purchase a property for $500,000 at 6%, 4%, 7%, whatever you think the interest rate will be, for 20 years, here's my payment. And of course, that doesn't include taxes, which taxes vary based on where you buy a property. So it's really important to really do your research and really put some numbers on the calculator somewhere and run loan payments, because it's very possible you could pay more for your property that you want to own than you will for your rent, which of course then, can hurt cash flow. And also we have to calculate that in your cash flow. So again, do you want to pay a higher monthly payment than rent? Now, again, this isn't all the time, but more often than not, I've noticed the rent is higher than, the monthly payment is higher than the rent, okay? Do you want to have the additional cost and responsibility of building maintenance? And this is a big one. About purchasing a building is almost like purchasing a home. but the costs are basically double. So everything you're going to do on a commercial property will cost you a lot more than it will on a residential property. Also, depending on your locality, some of the city towns, they're pretty strict on what they allow you to do to your property. Do you have to get permits to do work on your property? How long, often do they inspect it? So there's a big responsibility in making sure that your property is up to date, and again, cost. Just to give you an example, I helped a client purchase a property in Lancaster County, and she got the property for a great price, and the city came down, did an inspection, realized her sidewalk was cracked, and there was some rebar showing, from inside of the concrete. So they wanted her not only to replace the sidewalk, but she also had to replace a storm door that was facing the sidewalk because it was a hazard. It had some rust on it, and they were afraid that the sidewalk could collapse. So even though the sidewalk is public use, since it's her storefront, she's responsible for maintaining it. She had to borrow $40,000-$50,000 just to get that done. Um, and it took a long time for it to happen. So it's just gives you an example of what can really spring up on you when you're not even expecting it. So building maintenance is always incredibly important to make sure that you stay on top of. Do you want to have the responsibility of tenants? This is a big one. Everybody thinks rental income is a great idea, and it is, if it makes sense, if you have good tenants. But with tenants comes an extra responsibility on top of the building maintenance. Everyone hopes to be blessed with tenants that respect the property, that understand that they're renting a location and they have to take care of it. But that's sometimes the exception. So you want to make sure that your leases are airtight. You want to make sure that the building is up to code when it comes to fire alarms, things of that nature. You want to make sure you have quality tenants by doing background checks and pre-screening. These are all super important things. And if you don't have experience doing those things, you can hire third parties to do that for you, which I do recommend if this is your first time buying a mixed use commercial property. Again, that's an extra cost that you have to account for when you purchase this property. But tenants are great. Again, they can offset some of the cost of the building, but there is a big responsibility. Okay. So that's something that you really want to think about if you're ready to handle that responsibility. Is it the right time to purchase? Obviously, business owners like yourselves know rates are really high right now. We've been in a really feel good period of low rates for the past 7 to 8 years. Borrowing was never cheaper than it was at that point, but now they've really bounced back towards the other end, and it's very possible to have a commercial loan at 7, 8, 9%, even from a bank. So again, this is where you have to put out that loan calculator, find out what the average rates are. Obviously, account for your credit and things of that nature, and then see what that loan payment would be. I can tell you now there was a lot of people looking for properties, but since rates went up, they've kind of stopped looking just because it wasn't affordable anymore. So yeah, you definitely want to be aware, is it the right time to purchase a property? Is the economy strong enough that I can afford to? Is the economy going to be downturning? Are real estate prices high or low? Is my business performing well? Again, interest rates and even your personal credit are incredibly important. Um, as far as personal credit, just you may set up a different property holding LLC, but every bank is still going to check your personal credit. Your personal credit is still really important to deciding if you're a good quote unquote credit risk, to make sure that the bank is willing to lend you those funds to buy that property. So I really implore you, just to, if personal credit isn't strong, have somebody look at it, get some free help. I'm sure the SBDC can guide you to some resources that'll help. And the SBDCs can also help you with this process of seeing if you're ready to purchase a commercial property. Do you have time to purchase a commercial property? This is a 3 to 5 month process on the low end. Okay. Depending what kind of capital you have, if you have cash, you have to borrow, there's a different process, but normally 3 to 5 months. And this includes finding a property, engaging a realtor, commercial realtor, finding a bank to do the deal, handing in documentation, underwriting, inspections like appraisals, then the closing process. So this is from soup to nuts. It's around 3 to 5 months if everything goes smooth. So it does take some time. So if you know your lease is coming to an end and you want to buy a property, you really want to start that probably 8 months before your lease ends. That's going to be vital, because I can tell you right now, no transaction goes perfect. Something always comes up. And depending if the loan is going to be done on the traditional side, which is within the bank, or if we have to use the Small Business Administration or SBA, that can add or subtract a lot of time. So again, give yourself, if you know your lease is coming to an end in the year, that's when you really want to start really taking it seriously and doing a lot of research, if you're ready to buy a building. Do I qualify for a commercial small business loan? This is where, as a business owner, you really want to be educated on your credit score. Um, do you cash flow a new property? And do you have a down payment? Okay, and what I mean by cash flow is, you may think your business is making a lot of money, but when you add back your rent and subtract away your mortgage payment and the insurance and maybe putting some money aside for maintenance, you may realize that it's kind of tight to maintain this building. So it's one of those things to always, you know, find out what your payment's going to be with taxes, do some quick math or have your bookkeeper or accountant help you with that, and really see if it's something you want to do, again, because it's going to be an ongoing cost. And do you have equity? Banks are always going to look for equity depending on where you go. If you go to a traditional bank like a Wells Fargo, Bank of America, First National Bank of Pennsylvania, a CDFI may want a little bit less. And of course, you have hard money lenders and private investors who will typically take less money too, but you're also going to pay for that benefit. You're going to pay in a lot more in fees and interest rates. So I would recommend staying away from those options, because they're very, very expensive. So I want to pause it right here for this first slide, talking about, just, things to consider before purchasing a commercial property. I give people a few minutes to put some questions in there, and then, we'll go down to the next section. I do see one question here. Let's see, I joined late. So in terms of affording a commercial property, do loan officers only look at business assets, or will they consider personal assets? This is a great question, Jenke. So yeah, when you buy a commercial property, most banks will make you fill out what's called a personal financial statement. The document can vary in size, but and then what I'll do is I'll make sure I send a copy to the administrator so you can send it out to all you guys so you can look at it. But the document will list your assets and your liabilities. Okay, so preferably you want your assets to outweigh your liabilities. So we look at all personal assets. We look at cash in the bank. We look at, do you have a 401k? Do you have an IRA? Do you own a home? Do you own cars? Do they have equity? Do you have other rental properties you could leverage? Do you have a vacation home? We look at all those things, and what it does is it helps us, I would say, not even qualify you. It helps us feel more comfortable with the deal, but it may not get a deal approved just because, as you guys know, sometimes personal assets are really protected. So just because you may have a 401k or an IRA, it doesn't mean you're going to pull it out to pay the loan if something goes wrong. So all it does is just gives you a little more strength in, hey, if something would happen with the loan, this person has money or assets to liquidate to pay us off. So yes, we will look at personal assets to underwrite the loan. There's another question here from Zachary. I hope I said your name right. I apologize. Is grant money able to be viewed as income towards the property? Yes, if it's true grant money, absolutely. I know Philadelphia has some awesome grant programs. So if you have grant money and, we can see that it's in a business account, the bank may want to verify where that money came from. So you definitely want to keep any paperwork you have. But yes, grant money will definitely count as an equity injection. That is 100% correct. Just make sure you keep all your paperwork, because obviously you have to pay taxes on that grant money at the end of the year. So that's key. Parents and family can also give you money, but the bank will want a letter stating that that money that they gave you, regardless of the size of the deposit, is not repayable. Um, you know, now again, if you guys have a back end require, a back end agreement, that's up to you guys individually, but it can put the loan in danger if they find that out. So it has to be a true gift of money. Can you share a list of grants? So yeah, that's the $1 million question. There isn't really a huge grants aren't as available as they were anymore. So the one thing, the city of Philadelphia has a lot of great grant and loan programs. And what I'll do is I'll make sure when I send this to the administrator, this presentation, that I include a whole bunch of links for you guys and resources to check it out. Um, I would definitely implore, if you're in Philly, check the Commerce website of Philadelphia. They have a lot of great grant programs there. Now, is it for business acquisition? Not necessarily. It could be for a building you already own and they want you to fix the outside. Some of those grants have very tight geographic areas that they serve. So, for example, if you're in a nice suburb of Philadelphia where, it's expensive to live, it would be really hard to get a grant in that area. So yeah, so the bad news is there aren't a lot of grants out there, guys. Bigger cities have grant programs, but if you're in smaller areas like in Reading, Lancaster, you're not going to find any free money out there, unfortunately. So that's the bad news. Okay, great. Doesn't seem like there's any more questions coming in. Those are all fantastic. Oh, one more. Okay. Zachary asked another question. Is there any benefit for veterans when it comes to buying your first property? Awesome question. On the commercial side, no. On the residential side, yes. So, if you're on the residential side, veterans have a lot of great programs to purchase a house, even at no down payment, which is amazing. But on the business side, very little. Now, it doesn't mean that those loans don't get preferential treatment. Obviously, if we're a veteran, we want to make those loans just like if there's a minority or a woman borrower. Those loans take a lot, they have a stronger impact on the loan committees, but they don't necessarily make or break a loan. So unfortunately, on the commercial side, there isn't like a rate discount or anything like that. Whereas on the residential side, you can use I think the GI Bill, your veterans loan programs to really get, some really low cost money to purchase your first home. So great question there. So I think Jamila Porter had a question here. Are the programs only for brick and mortar? Or can it be a food truck purchase? So we're talking about brick and mortar specifically, but any other organizations I mentioned, the CDFIs like Community First Fund, the Women's Opportunities Resource Center, PIDC, Enterprise Center, Pursuit, they can do food truck purchases, new or used. So basically that would just be a small business loan. And the lending process is similar to borrowing for a commercial property. Obviously you're not going to do appraisals, things of that nature, but they may do equipment inspections and things of that nature. So yeah, you definitely want to talk to a local lender. Banks will typically not do a food truck purchase. It's very possible some might. Um, but food trucks, as you know, can be very expensive. A new food truck can easily cost $125,000 or more. So yeah, talk to your local organization and see how they structure those loan programs. But great question. All right, that's great. If you guys have any more questions, just put them in the chat while I keep going. So, right. So let me go to the next section down here. Okay. So, okay. All right. Let's go to starting the process. So, obviously the individuals on this call have already started that process, right? You're curious about purchasing a commercial real estate. You're curious about the cost, the process, what's the best way to proceed. Um, the first thing you want to do is really decide on your budget. Um, you may rent in a really great area for your business, but when you start looking for properties to buy in that area, they could be $600,000, $700,000. So it's a great area for a reason, but it may be really out of what you can afford. So the first thing you want to do is, look at your cash flow, talk to your bookkeepers, talk to your CPAs and accountants, and really see what you can afford without strapping yourself. This is the key thing. You don't want to buy a property if it's going to stress you out every month. A lot of people do that, and then the joy of owning a property really wears off really quick. So decide on a budget. Again, pull out the loan calculators online, just Google loan calculator, put in some fake dollar amounts, some fake interest rates. Typically terms will be 20 years. You do not get 30-year terms on most commercial real estate. So that's another thing which makes the payment higher. And also too, if you're really early in the process and you're not ready yet, but you're just getting some knowledge, talk to your bookkeeper and CPA. It's really important that they're on the same the same plan you are, because it's going to change how you do your taxes. If you're a business that maybe didn't show a lot of income because you didn't want to pay taxes, now's the time to do that. Now's the time to, show income, right? Because if you show that income, that's going to make it easier for you to qualify to purchase a loan. Not, I'm sorry, to purchase a property. If you're taking losses every year, you show very little income, it's going to be really hard to get a property, to get approved for a property, even if your credit's excellent. So cash flow is everything, right? You want to show that your business can afford to pay the property. So first step is decide on a budget. Second step would be speak to your local bank, a CDFI, a community development financial institution like Community First Fund, private and hard money lenders. Okay, so banks, everybody knows what banks are, right? That's where you have your business, small business checking account. That's where you have your savings accounts. Hopefully you have CDs, things of that nature. Banks underwriting is pretty strict. So you definitely want to talk to a experienced commercial loan officer or business lender, small business lender, and ask them, hey, how do you underwrite these loans? How do I qualify? What's the minimum cash flow I need? What's the minimum credit score? You don't want to spend time applying if you don't think you're going to have a good chance to get approved. Many times, small business owners have a great relationship with their branch manager, but not all branch managers are experienced in small business lending. So I really implore you to ask for a small business banker, or if you feel really confident in that branch manager's ability to get you through this process, talk to them about it. But definitely speak to your local bank first. Okay. You want to make sure that whatever underwriting criteria they're looking for, you qualify. I really recommend staying away from private or hard money lenders. The biggest reason why is because they're incredibly expensive, okay? And the terms typically never favor you. So an example would be, you might be able to go to a hard money lender and buy a commercial property with no money down, but you might pay a 5% fee on that. You might only be able to have a 15-year term, right? So they're going to find ways to get money out of you because they're taking extra risk. So I definitely, if you have to go to a private or hard money lender to buy a property, you're probably not ready to do that. So that's really key, but they are options, and I try to be transparent with all the options out there. CDFIs, like Community First Fund, are a great middle ground. They can help you figure out a way to buy a commercial property. They can take anywhere from 10 to 20% down. So they can really help you with that. They can look at SBA loan products to really minimize the risk to both you and the bank. So speaking with your local bank, CDFI, is really the key first step to making sure that you can do this. Okay. Pick where you want to purchase a property. Again, as I mentioned before, it may be ideal to purchase a property down the block or even purchase a property you're in. But if you're in a really good area and property values are high, you're going to have to get ready to pay up, because again, you're not going to, the seller is not going to want to sell that property at a discount, regardless of how long you've been there. So it's one of those things where, really do your research, really feel comfortable with the numbers. Again, you're going to hear me multiple times say research, research, research. Knowledge is power. So the more you research things, the better you'll be. Research the area, where you want to put your business, or where, where it's at, especially if you're relocating your business. So look at traffic patterns, population, demographic of residents. SBDCs can help you with this also. They can help you. They can help you analyze certain areas and say, hey, is this a good area to relocate your business, or does this make sense to stay here? Something you really want to make sure is really important. As you guys know, location, location, location. You hear that all the time. It still applies to commercial real estate, and it definitely applies to your business. It's really important too if you're moving your business to a new location to research your competition. Um, the last thing you want to do is move somewhere where you're going to be competing with somebody where where you rented before there was no competition, you were making a ton of money. So you definitely want to think about those two things. Sometimes people move and they're so excited about purchasing a property, they're not looking at, hey, does it make sense to move here? Am I going to be next to my competitor down the block? So that's really important also. Decide if you're looking for a mixed use property or just space for your business. This will really determine the amount of inventory that's available. Um, Again, this is more of a personal preference. Again, do you want to be a landlord? Or do you want to deal with commercial and residential tenants? Or do you just want a space for your business that your employees can come into, you work, you come out, close the doors, and it's over? So there's pros and cons to each one, but really decide, what you're looking for, and then see if you can find something that matches what your needs are. Um, then my last point on this is engage a commercial realtor. I can't tell you how important this is. There's nothing inherently wrong with residential realtors, but a lot of residential realtors don't have commercial realtor experience. So it makes a transaction a little more difficult for the lenders. Um, and I'll mention why in the next slide. So if you can engage a commercial realtor, they have a good beat on what's happening in their communities. Sometimes they have access to properties that aren't even, for sale yet, so you can be the first one to check them out. So that's really key. Commercial realtor will be your best friend. They'll also negotiate sales agreements for you, which is a huge thing. You don't want to negotiate your own sales agreement. Um, if possible, you can hire a lawyer to do that, but commercial realtors are definitely capable of doing that for you. And as far as the sales agreements and commercial realtors, just remember that anything is negotiable, anything on that commercial property. If you want somebody to fix a bathroom before you buy it, you can ask for it. If you want somebody to put in wood flooring, you can ask for it. If somebody needs to fix something, you can ask for it. Will you get it? That may be a different thing. But in the sales agreement, anything's negotiable. So that's the important thing. So what I'll do is I'll stop here on this section. I'll look at some questions here in the chat. So let me open this up here. Um, let's see here. Somebody asked if there's any in the Georgia area. Now, are we looking at like the state of Georgia, or is there a Georgia county? Just if you can give me some more information on that. Let's see here in the chat. I know a family who bought their second building, but they have a maintenance man to handle everything, and he knew some construction. Oh, that's a wonderful point, Kenneth. Yeah, if it's a big enough building, it's very possible you might be able to keep the maintenance man on. Um, there's also property management companies that you can hire to do that, but then you have to take that from your bottom line. That's going to be really important. Any income you may make might get wiped out by hiring a property management company, but the stress that it's not going to give you may be worth it in the beginning. So definitely want to do the math on that. There are property management companies that take care of small properties as well as large properties. There's also a comment here. I've noticed when you want to buy a franchise, sometimes they state they will find the right location for you. What are the companies called that can do that for you? So typically, if you're looking to open a franchise like a Subway or something like that, there's a couple ways to go about it. You can buy into one. You can open up a brand new one. Those franchisees will typically have resources or place people to connect you to help you find a location. But again, every franchise agreement is very, very different, and that could be another class for another day. But franchises all have different rules. Some franchises want you to build from ground up. Some franchises choose your location, like a Chick-fil-A, for example, will choose your location, even if you have to relocate you and your family to work there. So I would say, whoever you are negotiating that franchise with, definitely talk to them about what their expectations are. But again, use the SBDCs to do your research. The last thing you want to do is open a Subway or something like that in a location where you don't need one or where it's not going to make a lot of money. So that's super important. Um, let's see, here's another question here. How do I see local grants and funding in my area? I'm in Schuylkill County. I know they got redevelopment funding money from the state, but where do I go to find out more information? So I would definitely go to your county websites. Um, some of this redevelopment money that you're talking about, there's different uses for that money. So I can tell you, for example, most CDFIs were granted a pool of money that we can use to help small business borrowers for anything we want. So it could be commercial property, opening a startup. Now, what this money is, it's not necessarily grant money, but it's money that the CDFI can use because it's less risk for them. So instead of the CDFI using their own money, they can use some of these special loan programs, redevelopment programs, and take greater risk on a deal. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have to underwrite the deal, but what it means that the money that they're using, they can be a little more riskier since they're not losing their own money. Um, that's why banks have really strict underwriting processes, because banks get money from two locations. They get money from your deposits and they get money from the federal government. If they start doing bad loans, right, then what ends up happening is the bank becomes insolvent and you have chance of losing your deposits. So banks have to be very strict in how they underwrite things, whereas CDFI, since most CDFIs are nonprofits, we get money from investments from other banks, organizations. We get money from fundraising, we get money from donation, and all that money has different costs to it. So that cost is typically handed down to the customer. That's why bank rates are cheaper, because their money is cheaper to get. So I would say, call the local county office. Most offices have a business, a commerce, a commerce website. Chamber of Commerce are great resources also. But again, some of this money may have already been allocated to certain organizations, and then they have some they have the capacity to get that money out, but it may not be in the form of grants. Most likely it isn't. There's a lot of times when it's state money, they're pretty strict on how we can use that money and what it's for. So that's my recommendation there. Yeah, so if you need more time, as a letter of intent purchase helpful? Yeah, so what happens is you normally get a letter of intent when the lender has already done some preliminary underwriting. Okay, so it's one of those things that typically, to get a letter of intent from a lender, they have already seen some of your tax returns, they've done some math, and you guys have discussed terms and conditions. And what the lender will do will say, hey, I'm going to give you a letter saying we're talking, we're working it out. It hasn't been approved yet, but we feel good about the deal with the information we have right now. So yeah, if you get a letter of intent, that is great for the seller, um, because it gives them confidence that you've engaged an organization and that you have a good chance of getting approved. Again, I'll discuss something in the next slide, but it's important, again, to make sure that you do the due diligence first before engaging bankers and commercial realtors and things of that nature. So let me go to some of these questions here. Jenky asked a question: what if you're trying to buy real estate to start a real estate rental company? Real estate rental. So Jenky, are you looking at like Airbnbs? Is that what you're referring to? If you could just put that in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, just I'm gonna answer one of Jenky's other questions about purchasing properties outside of state. So just like banks, CDFIs, private money, hard money lenders, they all have geographic territories. So you definitely want to see if they can lend in the area that you want to purchase. Lending rules are different by state. So just because we can do something in Pennsylvania doesn't mean it's going to be easy to do in Georgia or Florida. Sometimes it's better to deal with an organization in that area. So that's also key too. You may want to do research on organizations wherever you want to buy property. If you want to buy investment properties in Florida, I do recommend talking to a Florida lender or a national lender, like a national bank. Um, your local organizations most likely won't be able to help you or refer you to the right place, since that's not something they do on a day in, day out basis. So yeah, I would recommend definitely researching organizations in the areas that you want to purchase property in. That's really key. Um, Janky asks how to find commercial realtors. I mean, what you can do if you just Google commercial realtor companies, you'll find a lot of different commercial realtors. And you want to interview them just like you would interview one of your employees. You want to see if you're a good match. Just because somebody's been doing it for 30 years doesn't mean they're a good match for you. So it's going to be super key to have that conversation with them, talk to them, see if you feel comfortable with them and if you trust them, and then retain that individual. So let's see here. Okay, these are all great questions, guys. Okay, so Janky, yeah, like VRBO. So this has been a touch point for a lot of lenders. Most a CDFI like Community First Fund, PIDC, a lot of times they may not have trouble helping you purchase a property to be an Airbnb, VRBO. But really what's going to dictate that is, besides having, money to purchase a property, but do you have experience running that type of business? That's going to be the key. Um, so if you have experience, there's a good chance that, yeah, they could do a property for you that you could rent out as VRBO, any of the other organizations that do that. But yeah, you definitely want to talk to the different specific lenders. Banks typically don't like to do that. They're not fans of that because it's non-owner occupied. They like to do owner occupied deals where your business is actually in that property. That is just pure investment real estate. But yeah, CDFIs and other organizations can definitely do that. That's not a problem at all. Let's see. Jakey asks, is there any tips for qualifying as a newbie? I would say not really. I mean, again, research is key. Utilizing partners like the SBDC is key. Um, you can ask other people who've purchased properties, but their experience is going to be very different than yours. So, any advice they give you, of course, write it down, take it with a grain of salt, because again, you're not going to have the same experience. But once you get this sheet, this is a good starting point to at least start getting the juices flowing and really thinking about, am I ready to do this? So I would definitely reference this. And of course, information on the internet is plentiful. You can always go online there. Let's see, there's another question here. If someone owes $110,000 on a building and the bank is foreclosing it, how do you go about submitting your first offer as far as knowing what to submit to get the best price? Oh, that's a really good question. So yeah, if you're able to get a hold of foreclosed properties, you really have to call the bank that is foreclosing on that property. And there's typically a separate foreclosure department or what they call loss prevention department. They typically take that um, deal or asset and move it to a different side of the organization to do what lenders call a workout. So can they sell the property? Can they get money from the borrower? There's a whole process to do that. But yeah, most banks have a foreclosed division or short sale division. Um, Unfortunately, you may have to be on the phone a lot trying to find where that is because it's not something that's listed freely on the internet. But I would find out who the borrower is. I mean, who the lender is for that deal. Call that bank and see if there's a way you can maybe get in there before anybody else does. So that's a great question. That's obviously going to add a lot of complexity to your commercial real estate deal because depending on the condition of the property, that can really make the deal a lot longer or more challenging. All right, great questions, guys. These are all awesome questions. All right, let's go to the next little slide here. Excuse me. Okay. So let's talk about what financial institutions look for. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is that in most cases, you will not get a pre-approval from a small business lender like a bank or a CDFI. We did talk about a letter of intent. That's probably the closest you're going to get to a pre-approval, okay? But all the letter of intent says is that you've engaged the lender, they've done some preliminary work, and that the deal might make sense on paper. But remember, that lender hasn't received all of your documentation to make sure that it makes sense, okay? And there's a lot of work on your end that you have to do to make that happen. Now, if you go to a hard money private lenders, they work very differently. They don't conform to the same rules that a CDFI or a bank does. It's very possible they may give you a pre-approval letter. But again, the cost to do that loan is going to be very expensive. So the benefit of hard money and private lenders, a lot of times they can be fast. They can do a closing in 30 days. But in the banking world, the faster the money is, the more expensive it's going to cost you. So you definitely want to factor that in. One of the things we look for is strong cash flow from the business, any W-2 employment, and any rental income that property generates. So any bank loan you get, a bank is always looking for a couple of ways to get out the deal if in the event something happens with the business. So the first way is, can the business pay? If the business has strong cash flow and it can pay, great, that takes care of itself. What other secondary repayment forms are there? Does the owner of the business in the building, do they have a partner that has W-2 employment, makes a lot of money? Great, that's plan B. If the business can't pay, maybe the spouse can pay. You also have rental income. Does the business generate rental income from residential units or commercial units? That also goes into the cash flow. So what we do as a bank, an organization, as a CDFI, we look at all those different cash flow sources and we add them up and we see, okay, this makes sense. They can afford this building. That's why it's really hard to do a pre-approval. In the residential world, they typically only take your tax returns, maybe your W-2, and that's it. They don't look at all these other factors that go into buying a commercial property. Credit score. So as you guys know, banks, typically they don't want to talk to you unless you're like a 670 and up. Banks have been a little more looser with their credit scores, but now that rates have gone up and lending is tightening, I don't know where that's going to go. But most banks, you have to be over a 670 and up just to even kind of get your foot in the door. Okay. CDFIs, we've done, CDFIs can do loans for credit scores as low as 590s and up. Obviously, the lower the credit score, the more the lender, like myself, is going to have to talk about your credit challenges on behalf of the committee. So, when credit scores are high, it's a non-issue. We don't even bother to look at it. Hard money and private lenders, most credit score ranges. So that's the good thing about hard money lenders. Again, if you have a ton of money saved up, but the credit score isn't great, hard monies can do the loans for you, but you're going to pay the penny. You're going to pay a nice price for that. But again, they're not going to necessarily focused on credit score. They're going to be focused on how much money they can make up front. Okay. Do you have any experience with managing a commercial property? If you do, this is preferable. So here, this is important also. So let's say you're, a small bakery, somewhere in the city, and all of a sudden you go to your banker and you want to buy a 7,000 square foot warehouse to, ramp up production 300%. That's a great idea, but it may not make sense. And you may not be qualified at that time to do that, okay, based on your experience. So it's really about, keeping the properties you look at and the deals you look at manageable and make them make sense to the lender. Help them figure that out. Bank's going to determine the type of financing. Do they want to do it traditionally? Do they want to use the SBA? Are there any special state, local, and government programs they can put into these into this deal? So banks, CDFIs, what we're really good at is putting the puzzle together. And if we can grab money from source A and source B and source C to get your loan done, we'll do that. Yes, it makes it a little more complicated, but we'll be happy to do that to try to find a way to get the property you want. All right, I'll stop right there. In this section, what financial institutions look for. Let's see some questions here. Okay. Well, the bank. Okay, so I guess so. Zachary is still talking about the property, the foreclosed property. So, will the bank look at the property to reassess its value? Yes, but what's going to happen is they're going to do an as is evaluation, and if that property has been damaged, it may not be worth much. every bank, every organization is different. When there is an asset that goes into foreclosure, like a property, they may want to get it off their books and they may make you refinance it with another bank. They may not want to do it for you. So some banks are perfectly okay in rolling that asset back into their portfolio and refinancing it, under a different business name, but that's something you'd have to ask them. Under the current lending environment, Elliot has a question here. In the current lending environment, are lenders placing more importance on DCR than EBITDA or NOI? Great question. So DCR stands for debt coverage ratio. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, tax deductions, and I forgot what the A is right now. And NOI is return on your investment. So yeah. So a lender will typically look at DCR like a CDFI. Banks will look at EBITDA. So again, it really depends where you're borrowing from. There's some lenders out there who, if your business doesn't cash flow, they could care less about what the rental income is on the property. There's some lenders that want to see both. And I'll give you an example, like the SBA. If you ever do what's called an SBA 504 program or an SBA 7A program, they may not count any investment real estate income from that property. So, one of the requirements the SBA has is that you have to occupy at least 51% of that property. So let's say the other 49% is rented out and you're relying on that income to pay the loan. They may not take that income into consideration, which can really hurt your deal. Whereas banks and CDFIs typically will always take that income into consideration because it's there, especially if they're commercial long-term leases. That is a lot more valuable than a tenant who is month to month. So that's also something that will go into. Oh, I'm sorry, guys, I lost you. You still there?
Yes, everything's still set up.
Okay, I
Are you good
apologize,
on
guys.
your end?
Yeah. I'll just share screens again here. So let me go back to the questions here. So that was a great question, Elliot. And again, guys, if you don't know how to calculate your DCR, talk to your bookkeeper or accountant. They can help you calculate what that looks like. Let me go see what's in the chat here. Okay, yes, yeah, the webinar came back up. So hopefully everybody was able to log back in. Great. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know sure if that was my end or on the other end here. Let's see other questions here. Okay, awesome. Those are the same questions. All right, great. So we'll go to the next section here. And again, feel free to type in more questions. Let's see. So closing cost estimates. So this is where a lot of sticker shock comes in. A lot of people understand I have to have 10, 20% down to buy a property and they figure that out. What they don't calculate typically is the closing cost. And the hard part about closing cost is you don't know the final number until a week before closing most of the time. So I always tell individuals when I give estimates on closing cost, I always estimate higher than what I believe there will be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down these closing costs here. And then what I do once I break down these closing costs, based on the property size you're looking at, you can kind of figure out where you're going to stand, okay, and how much extra money you have to have above and beyond, just the equity, okay. So appraisals, so they can range anywhere from 600 to 2,500 or more. The reason I stop at 2,500 because that's the typical average price for a commercial appraisal. But if you're buying, for example, a large warehouse or a 10-unit building, that can make the appraisal a lot more expensive because there's a lot more work. The $600 appraisal is more for the 2-unit investment property, or the mixed unit where it's one commercial, one residential property. So appraisals can vary. Typically, you don't have a lot of control on that cost. Banks typically have set vendors they use. CDFIs have a lot more flexibility. Hard money, private lenders also have vendors they use. So you really don't have a lot of control over that. But the lender should be telling you what that estimate is coming in at so that you're comfortable paying it. Depending on the type of commercial property, you might have to do a phase 1 environmental. So what a phase 1 environmental is, it's an environmental screening to make sure that whatever property is involved in the transaction did not have any environmental hazards up to maybe past over 100 years ago. So, as you know, back in the day, people weren't too concerned with throwing oil on the ground or dumping gas down a well or a sewer system or whatever it is. So, these properties can be a danger to you and the local community if gas is coming up from the ground, if the soil is dirty or poisoned in any way. So what a phase 1 does is it's a third-party company who will research the use of that building. They'll go back 100 years or more. So it's valuable information to have, because if you don't do a phase 1, and God forbid something is wrong with that property in the future, you can open up yourself to a lot of liability. So, and it's going to be the onus is on you then to prove that your building isn't the cause of the problem. Okay. I've had a few examples where the phase 1 environmental came back with a lot of different findings, is what they call it. So then you go to phase 2 and 3. Phase 2 is more detailed research. So we're going to drill into the ground. We're going to test water samples. That can go anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000, depending on how big the property is. And then phase 3 would be what's called remediation. It's very rare that you do a phase 3 unless you're looking at a big, you're going to put a big shopping center in. But the transaction sizes you guys are dealing with, you really should never do a phase 3. And most likely, if anything comes up on the phase 1 report, you're just going to walk away, because you're going to have to dump thousands of more dollars into the transaction in order to clean the building up. Again, phase 3, now you're talking about removing gas tanks out of the ground, removing oil tanks out of the ground, removing soil and displacing that soil and putting in new soil. So you're really talking about some serious construction, and that's why the cost can be super expensive. But again, my recommendation is if there's a phase 1 report and the lender tells you there's a lot of problems, cut your losses and walk away. Find a new property. It's going to cost you a lot of money to fix it up. Now, if the seller wants to pay that money to fix it up, great. If they want to reduce the cost of the property, the sale price of the property, so maybe you can finance fixing that property up, great. But these are things that you have to negotiate with your realtor and with the seller. Broker fees, they can be anywhere from 3 to 6%. So this is a big deal. A lot of people don't necessarily include broker fees in the transaction amount. But again, you're looking at a $500,000 property, 3% of that is a lot of money that somebody has to pay that. So sometimes the seller pays it, sometimes the buyer pays it, sometimes they split it. So it really depends on how that transaction is structured. But again, remember, it's a sales agreement. You guys can negotiate anything, even those costs, okay? So that's really important to understand. State tax and city tax, it's really hard to nail down what this fee is going to look like, because it depends on when you close the property. But you can generally get this information free on whatever county website you're buying from. You can kind of put the address in and it'll show you what the county taxes are. So it's really important to know what your taxes are going to be. But this can also show up on your, on your HUD-1 is what they call it. Sometimes what happens is, let's say the seller already paid taxes for the entire year. He'll get reimbursed some of that money and you'll have to pay in some of that money. That's typically what it does. Lender closing fees. So this is a big deal too. Most lenders have some type of closing fee. 1 to 5% of the loan amount, could be even greater if you're messing with hard money or private lender. So it's really important to make sure you understand what that is. The good news is every lender either in a letter of intent or your actual approval commitment letter, will typically list the estimate of the fees, so it should not be a surprise to you. Again, it will vary based on the amount of the loan, but you typically should know these fees are going to be present way before you get to the closing table. Some commercial property loans sometimes need an attorney to help close these properties, especially if the LLC is owned by multiple partners. I don't recommend you trying to figure that out yourself, even though it is an extra cost. But there may be attorney fees that apply to some of these loans, especially if they're SBA loans. Most organizations like ours, we have our own SBA people, but some small organizations have to hire a third party to do that. So that's important to understand. And of course, you can imagine that can be thousands of dollars also. Title insurance, absolute necessity. Typically what happens is the commercial realtor will hook you up with the title company, or the lender will. And basically what that is, it's an insurance on the mortgage that nobody has any rights to that property now that you bought it. It's really a protection for the lender and you, but title insurance price is based on cost of the property or the sales agreement. So, if you're buying a small property, title insurance might be $1,000. If you're buying $1 million property, title insurance could be $10,000. So it really depends. Building inspections, these can vary also. I typically don't see these over $1,000. Most commercial real estate transactions won't require you to do an inspection, but I would not let that happen. I would pay for it out of your own pocket, do an inspection on the property. You want to make sure what you're buying isn't going to be a money pit. You're not going to have to put a new roof in a year. So you really want to make sure the property is in the best shape possible, because again, you'll get stuck with that deferred maintenance. Let's see, there's a question here for that. Okay, great. So I think I have till 1 o'clock. Let me just go through this real quick. So documents needed to apply for a loan, you want to have ready for your banker. They're going to want to see at least 3 years business tax returns. If you're younger than that, bring whatever you have. 3 years personal tax returns, with all pages and schedules. Don't leave any pages out. Make sure you have everything. For your business, they'll want a profit and loss and a balance sheet for your business. Is super important. You normally don't want the profit and loss and balance sheet to be more than 3 months old. So if you were buying a property, let's say February 1st, the information shouldn't be any older than November 2022. Okay. If you give me a balance sheet and profit and loss of September, it's pretty much junk, because there's been 6 months of revenue there that has to be shown. Okay. A rent roll. This is really a way just to see if your property is going to make money. So what a rent roll is, and you guys can Google this, or your commercial realtor may even do one for you, or your banker. But all you're going to do is take all the projected income minus all of the projected expenses. So we're looking at taxes, utilities, garbage, property management. You take all those costs out of the revenue, and whatever you have left is what you're going to make on the property. I think you'll realize very quickly that you don't make a lot of money off commercial properties, especially in the first 10, 15 years, because you have so much debt on it. A lot of times you're barely breaking even. And if you do the math, the less dollars you put down when you buy the property, the harder it's going to be to cash flow. Most properties, when you put 10% down or less, don't cash flow anymore. So you're literally losing money owning that property. Okay, that's why banks ask for 20%. So it's typical loan document stuff. There's nothing really super special. You will have to have a signed sales agreement with, for the lender to take it seriously. So that's going to be important. And again, your realtor can help you do that. Let's see here. So let's open it up to Q&A. I'm not sure if we can open it up so we can hear voice. But Elliot here has another question. When CDFI traditional lenders look at the P&L statement of the business, do they take out owner's draw salary if there is not one before working the numbers? That is an awesome question, Elliot. So that is a specific underwriting question. I can speak on Community First Fund's behalf. We don't typically take it out, but it will impact how we look at the deal, because at the end of the day, we know you're going to pay yourself something, right? So some some CDFIs or underwriters will absolutely take out an owner's drawer. Some will add it back in. It just depends on the situation. That's where you have a good relationship with the lender to talk. But I know for a fact that in our loan committees, if someone does not take out an owner's drawer, it does put up a little bit of a red flag because we know business money is leaving the business, especially if it's a profitable business. Um, so that's something where, again, I would definitely talk to your bookkeeper or CPA to figure out what the best strategy is for that. But yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yeah, again, they will notice owner draws are not taken out or are taken out, and it will be a discussion about how it affects the numbers for sure. If one's more beneficial than the other, I couldn't tell you. I would say it's always better to show the owner's drawer because we want to show the true cash flow. That's always important. Let's see. So let me see questions here. Yeah, so all in all, team, I mean, buying a commercial property is super exciting. It's a big learning process. The first time you do it, you're going to expect a lot of bumps. You're going to expect a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of frustration. you know, if you have a really experienced lender, it does make it easier. But, I always say any small business loan that closes is a little miracle just because so many things can go wrong. There's so many variables that happen, and some of them are out of your control no matter how prepared you are. So definitely go in it with an open mind. Again, Temple SBDC is fantastic resource to use. They will walk you through it. They will connect you to people who can finance your property. They will connect you to people who can really help you get set on this journey. And, it's super rewarding when you get those keys, but it is a challenge. So it's one of those things that you just got to be ready for it. But I'll be happy to help you walk through that. What I'm going to do is everyone's going to get these slides and information. I'll have my contact information. Feel free to call, email, or text me with any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Even if you're not working with me on the financing, it's totally fine. I love to help people, and I love to be available for you in your journey to get this done. So I don't have any other information because I don't want to keep going too far into the weeds. But again, please let me know if you need anything, and I really encourage you to go on this journey if you can afford to do it. So thank you everyone for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Angel, for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just see if we have any questions.
Sure, let's check.
All right, no questions. Um, see, I did put in the chat box a survey link for this webinar. We value your feedback, and we use it to continue to provide no-cost webinars like this one. And it is a requirement by our funders, the SBA. So if you can take the time to answer that 4-question survey, that would be great. As well as a follow-up email will be sent with that survey, as well as you can follow up if you have any questions for Angel or for us. We will be happy to answer that.
And please be honest. I can take criticism. It's all good. It'll help me be a better speaker.
All right. Looks like we don't have any other questions.
Awesome.
Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Angel.
Have a great day, guys. Bye.